guys, welcome back to the homestead. So today I'm actually going to be doing a couple things in the kitchen. I've got soaps to make, I've got salves to make. I want to put some more chicken fajita in a jar together. I'm going to make my homemade ravioli. So it's kind of a busy day, so we're getting an early start. I'm going to take you through the ravioli process because I personally enjoy that one so much. I want to share it with you guys, but we're going to start with our fajitas in a jar. So that way, while I'm making the ravioli and waiting for the dough and everything to happen with that, I'm multitasking, right? So I'll have my canner going. Now this is a cold process, right? So everything is cold. My canner's cold. My jars are clean, sanitized, and cold. My chicken beans are dry. Now here's the thing. There's a couple ways that you can do this one, depending on how comfortable you are with canning and what you like to do in your canning. If you want to pre-soak your beans, you can pre-soak your beans. If you want to start with them dry, you can start with them dry. If you just want to do the chicken and the onions and have that ready to go, you can do that. So, I mean, this recipe to me is so versatile that I really enjoy it, depending on how I want to set this up, how I'm prepping them out, knowing what's coming down the pipeline, and if we're going to be doing more camping or anything like that, how much I want already put together. If you're a texture person and you're scared that your peppers are going to get too soft in this for your liking, you can leave them out and add your peppers when you're throwing it all together. If you don't want your tomatoes in there, you can leave those out and throw those in later. So it really depends on your personal preference and how you like about it. So this one I really like. If you don't want chicken and you want to do beef, you can do that. So I think it's pretty easy. So what we're going to do is, in this bowl, I have us prepped out beans, black beans, and pinto beans. And we're just going to put about 2 inches in the bottom of each jar. And like I said, if you prefer to pre-soak your beans, you can pre-soak your beans. If you want to leave the beans out and just have your meats and onions prepped, I'm going to give you the full recipe below for my fajita mix. That way you know all your spices are organic and there's no preservatives or anything like that. And if you're like me, you're always looking for a new seasoning recipe to try. If you don't like pinto, you can swap out any beans you like for your fajitas. It's a mixed bag around here, what we like. So I just do a multi-mix for everybody. Now in the pint jars, I find I can usually get about 3 to 4 tacos, depending on your taco size, out of them. So just kind of keep that in your thoughts as you can this up. If you prefer to do quarts, well then of course that is going to change. What I like about this one too is because it's cold and cold and cold, you don't have the urgency to get everything done so quickly. I also have a chipotle beef and a barbacoa I want to throw together too. So that way it gives us a lot of different options. And sometimes I take those and mix them together depending on how crazy I want things. And I'll give you the full mix of like what my ratios were for the beans down below too. It's about 4 cups of black beans to 2 cups of pinto beans. But again, it just depends on your personal preference, what beans you like, if you're going to add the beans, if you're not going to add the beans. This one's really fun to play with. You can do chicken and beef. I've even done lamb with it too. It just depends on, well, honestly, where your meat sales are. Whatever's on sale, well, those are the tacos we're having this week. So we've got those in. Now, what we're going to do from there, and I like the color for this one too. Now you can take, when you put your meat in, you can put your seasoning in at that point. I prefer to take my seasoning and go ahead and mix it up in the bowl with my chicken and kind of let it marinate a little bit so the flavors kind of infuse to the chicken, if you will. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to take a couple onions with clean hands, of course. Put those in. These onions actually smell quite good. Then you're going to take your tomatoes and layer those on top. The meat is going to be what you're going to put on the tip top. So you're kind of stacking until you get to that point. Again, if you're not adding the tomatoes, the onions, or the beans, of course, it would just be packing in your meat. And then at that point, if you just wanted to raw pack it and not add a broth, well, of course you could. Then you're just going to have seasoned taco meat on the shelf, which is, or fajita meat, which is fine too. And I'm using Roma tomatoes. And these were, it's about a half a Roma tomato per pint jar, just to give you a measure as you're trying to get your ingredients together. And then we're just going to now take our peppers, and I try to mix them up as much as I can to get a nice little color palette going. Like I said, if you're a texture person and you're worried about these cooking down to the point, then don't put them in. We want to put these. You can always, peppers don't take very long to cook, so you can always add those in later. And now I want to take my chicken, and because there is cayenne pepper in this, I don't want to put my hands all over it. And what I have chopped up over here, I've already cubed it, is thighs and breasts. So you get a dark and a white meat in this. Of course, again, personal preference. And then once you get them in, because you don't need to see me do all of these, you're just going to take your chicken broth and pour over it. And this is why I put the seasoning, the chicken and the seasoning on top. Because as you're pouring it, right, the seasoning will kind of go through it. And then, of course, you're going to take your air bubbles out. Put your jar on, and take our towel over here, and wipe our top. Told you this is my, I can't talk in can apparently. So yeah, so you're just gonna put your top on, right, and then you're just gonna put it into your cold canner, stacking as you would before, right? So What your canner will allow is what you're going to put in there. So I'm going to finish putting these together. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put our canner, we're going to go through our vent phase like normal. We're going to build up our pressure. And again, since I'm doing pints for my area, I'm going to do 15 pounds pressure for 75 minutes. But then when it's done, we'll come back and we'll have fajitas. In the interim, while we're waiting, we're going to do some other stuff. So I'm going to take you through that as well. So we'll be back. Okay, guys, so I'm throwing my dough together here for the ravioli, and I had two choices today of what project I was going to take on while I was canning, and one of them was organize the shelf directly behind me with my soap supplies on one side and my canning things the way they needed to be. And I mentally have probably paralyzed myself on how I want to organize that stuff out because I've overthought the process. So I figured it was probably best that I did not do that today. So I decided to make the raviolis. That dough that I'm putting together is actually the same dough that I use for my lasagna noodles and my spaghetti noodles. So I'm going to put that full recipe below for you guys. But once you get that thrown together, you're just going to kind of put it on the board and cover it with a towel and let your dough rest for about a half hour. Now, mind you, right, the canner, we've just kind of started that, so it's still pretty cold, so we're waiting for that to heat up. And I have positioned myself on the opposite side of my kitchen so that way I can kind of watch my canner the entire time, but not micromanage my canner the entire time. And I like to find something that really fills that space, because I find if I'm just sitting there watching my canner, it's kind of boring and you're like watching your life disappear before your eyes. So this process is actually kind of very filling for that. It's a very easy recipe that I'm throwing together for the stuffing of the ravioli too. And I have found that stuffing recipe that I am going to put below, if I swap out the ricotta for cream cheese and the Parmesan for mozzarella, and I mix that all up in the food processor, well, it makes a phenomenal stuffed mushroom or a nice spread to go on top of your bagels. So just kind of keep that in mind, guys, because I like recipes that I can make in bulk. And so if you did that with the cream cheese and everything to make a spread or a mushroom stuffing, then you could freeze it and take it out in small batches as you wanted to make those items. So just kind of keep that in mind, because I always like a recipe I can get more bang for my buck on. So this one really is very basic, though. I think right off the top of my head, it's I use turkey sausage, and then I use hamburger, and then there's my homemade ricotta cheese. But if you don't make your own ricotta cheese, then you of course can use any organic ricotta cheese out there to fill in. We got Parmesan and then fresh spinach. And of course I use organic spinach for that. And even though you get the wash, please wash your spinach before you put it in. That's just maybe me being picky, but here we are. But like I said, you're just going to kind of pre-cook, right, your sausage and your hamburger and get that nice and cooked together. And then you're going to take it out of the pan and you're going to put it in a bowl on paper towels and drain as much grease out of it. Now, of course, since I'm using turkey sausage and I'm using, I think the hamburger was 93.7, there's not a whole lot of grease in this one. But I still try to take as much grease as I can out. I have also drained it through a colander as well too. It just depends on the setup that you want to do. But I find the paper towels for the little bit of grease that I have works pretty well. So again, I've cleaned out my food processor now that I finished up the dough, and we're just going to start to throw all the ingredients into here to get them fully mixed as much as we can. Now there comes a point right when I put the ricotta in that I kind of run out of space, so the ricotta stirs down quite nicely, so you don't have to worry about that. But you want that meat chopped up pretty finely along with the spinach. And then, of course, you can stir in your Parmesan and your ricotta from there without any issues. And, of course, salt and pepper to taste. If you're watching your salt, well, then you wouldn't probably need to put as much in it because the sausage probably has enough salt in it for you. I've pre-washed my spinach, and I'm just kind of, throwing this all together, like I said, and I do kind of run out of space, but it is what it is. But this filling is enough to do right at 100 raviolis, or if you're going to do your stuffed mushrooms, probably about 100 stuffed mushrooms too. That's what I'm saying. You're going to make a big enough batch here that you can freeze it for quite some time to use it later. But again, the dough recipe that I'm going to give you is only for half of the amount of the filling. So if you only wanted to make half of your raviolis now, you could. Or if you wanted to make a big batch like I'm doing, then you would just double your recipe for the dough. So I'm going to finish putting that together now. So once you have this all mixed together, I just put it back in the bowl because, like I said, the bowl that my hamburger and sausage came out of, because most of that grease went away with the paper towels. So it's not like there's a bunch of residuals in there. So just put it in the bowl, and now you're just going to go stick it in the fridge while you're making your noodles, because that mixture works a lot better when it's cold. You also don't want anything to be kind of runny and make your noodles soggy. So, at this point, it's still kind of warm. So it would make your noodles soggy. So you want to get it cold. So at this, I'm just setting it in the fridge while I'm making all my noodles. Now, I know there's attachments and stuff that I could get to go with my mixer to make my noodles, but I like my little hand crank one. Um, Sometimes I want to sling it across the kitchen because, if it jams up, then it goes sideways. But in the same essence, I do like the fact that I have more control over my noodles. With the ravioli, if you're taking this recipe to make the ravioli, you're going to want to try to get those noodles, or the dough, excuse me, as thin as you possibly can get it without filling, without the dough busting when you go to fill it. Now, for my little manual one, of course, the first time I run it through, I do it on the widest section to just get a nice sheet of dough, and then I go and adjust it to get it to, it's probably, it's not the thinnest one. I think it's at a 7, somewhere between a 6 and a 7 on that manual one, to get a thin enough dough that when I go to put my mixture in it, it doesn't pop. It also doesn't rip. And as you can see, I'm able to move it and fold it over itself. And so I have a little wiggle room. And it's quite pliable too, right? So you can kind of fold it on itself while you're stretching it out. Now, I do a large enough noodle that I can just kind of fold it back into itself. But if you feel more comfortable doing smaller sheets that are the size of the ravioli press, well, then that works. You see, my mixture is now cold, so I'm bringing that out, and I'm going to stuff a few for you guys. And really, how much mixture you get in there Of course, depends on how your dough holds up. I think I end up getting about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half in each one of those little ravioli pockets. Um, so again, it just kind of depends. Play with it a little bit, but you at this point have chunked it down so much with that food processor that it's quite pliable to get in there. So I'm just gonna stuff each little ravioli pocket now, and then I'm gonna fold the dough back over it. And when you see me get to the part where I am putting the rolling pin on it, we're not applying a lot of pressure. Now I know it's going to look like I'm applying a lot of pressure because I'm trying to really hold the ravioli thing. It's got grippies on it, but I have trust issues when it comes to mechanics like that. So we're just going to kind of apply a light pressure. And what you want to do is to get the dough on the back to mold to the dough on the front. But again, you're not trying to press down so hard that your little raviolis pop through the front side and rip. And so once you get this where it needs to be, you're going to just kind of flip it over, and then you're just going to kind of push your little raviolis back out through the holes, and then that way it'll lay flat, and then you individually cut them out. So through this process today, right, while I was waiting for my canner to finish, I was able to make 16 pints of my chicken fajitas, and then I was also able to make enough raviolis. I think we ended up with somewhere around 85 finally put up. I'll do a count in the end. But we ended up with enough there that I've got quite a few lunches now packed away too, right? So in that 75 minutes, right, which ultimately probably ended up being more like 2 hours because we had to wait for the canner to heat up, we got a lot of bang for our buck. And I feel probably more accomplished than I would have had I cleaned out the cabinets behind me, because at this point I'd probably be sitting on the floor crying because I wouldn't know where to put anything back. So I enjoy this. Like I said, I'm going to put the full recipe below for you guys with some little suggestions of what you can sub out if you want to use it in other areas. So I'm going to finish this up. They go individually onto a pan with parchment paper, and then I freeze them. Okay guys, so in the time that my 16 pints processed, I have them now sitting here waiting to cool. As you can see, they turned a little red because I went a little heavy on the cayenne pepper, so let's hope we can eat those later. So I was able to make that recipe makes quite a lot of raviolis. I took them and individually froze them, and now I have them in their baggie. So now we've got probably somewhere between 85 to 90 raviolis left, because we actually had some for lunch. If you're going to freeze these, then when you go back to cook them, make sure that you have a rolling boil with salt water. You want it almost close to as salty as the ocean. And then you're going to drop your raviolis in a little bit, but a little bit careful not to crowd them, of course. Once it starts to boil again, then what you will do at that point is you will start your timer for 4 minutes. Now, if you're cooking them fresh, same water, but you're only going to cook them for 3 minutes. That to me is kind of like the easiest thing to do when I'm pressure canning, is to take on something else, and I set myself up so I can sit here and watch my canner the entire time. Usually I'm making soap or trying some new bread recipe or just something wonky. That way I'm standing in the kitchen, and I'm not just standing in the kitchen, you know, for 75 minutes watching my life expire. I'm actually getting other things done as well. That to me is just the easiest way to multitask and get things done. Sometimes I have soap lined up on the counter over there doing that too, but I felt like not driving myself insane today. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to put all the recipes and spices and everything that I used below. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Welcome all the new subscribers. I really do appreciate it. And welcome all the subscribers, or thank you all the subscribers that continue to come back. I really do appreciate it as well. I'm enjoying the comments. I'm enjoying interacting with you guys. So thank you again and have a great day.